Hey everybody, welcome back. I am Emily Moyer. Dani Katz is with me. We were supposed to have a guest today. This is a guest we've been supposed to have before, but interesting things seem to keep happening to prevent our getting together, which means there will be massive revelations when we finally do. So we wish him well and that everything turns out okay for him. But we decided just to roll with it anyway today and do just kind of a short show. You got an extra show last week because David was with us, David Martin. And we're gonna, so it's a little extra bonus of the two of us. Who can ever get enough of the two of us? Dani, I think we're on number 35. Words number 35. There we are.
Wow, they're just
age.
Is 35 middle age? No, that person would only live to be 70. I mean, it's such a ridiculous thing anyway, middle age, as though we know that we get to have the exact same amount of years that we've already lived.
Yeah, it's weird. Everything's weird.
Yes, it is.
Everything is weird. So because our regular show is not happening, the show that we had kind of planned is not happening, we're just going to sort of pop around about some stuff that's sort of been on your plate. I only have a few things because I sort of wasn't focused on gathering together a bunch of little tidbits and thoughts, but we'll just start talking and see what happens. Oftentimes when we think nothing is going to happen, then we have like a very lengthy show. So right now the plan is a kind of short show today and maybe something else back next week when maybe he's probably going to be a little longer. Whatever it is, it'll be what it'll be. And here we go. So Kanye.
Okay, so I feel like before we start with Kanye, we have to start with Joe Rogan's very serious announcement by way of a different face saying that, right? Because he didn't look like himself at all. And he put up this very serious Instagram video saying, well, Jamie has COVID, so we can't do any more podcasts indefinitely because we have to wait until he has tested clean 3 times. And then the whole comment stream was just like,
it has to be, we've all tested, we all have to wait 10 days and 3 clean tests or something.
10 days and 3 clean tests, so no more shows at all indefinitely. And then the comment stream was just awash with, so the Illuminati won't let you interview Kanye, so the deep state doesn't want you talking to Alex. Like everyone just knew exactly what it was. No one bought it for 2 seconds.
Yeah, okay, so here are my thoughts. I saw that little announcement that you sent to me on Instagram kind of thing. So, okay, couple of things. So he looked really weird. So I don't know if just he's been wearing makeup on his own podcast that we're unaware of. And so it's like,
it did not look like him at all.
It was really weird. Like it was like, he looked like a cartoon character of him, like an aged cartoon character. It was really weird. And I think what I heard him say was that shows are canceled. And definitely right now, we may do some video ones, which I think he did end up doing one that was Matthew McConaughey. And Matthew McConaughey lives in Austin, at least part-time.
So that wasn't in person with Matthew McConaughey?
Yeah, that looked like it was on Zoom or Skype or something like that to me. And then it seems to go back to in-person interviews. So here are my sort of immediate thoughts. It was an intelligence communication. This idea that someone had COVID was some kind of thing like we're hitting pause on something or we're switching directions with the way we're going with this. And then the next thing you told me sort of gave me the indication, and you told me that you have been listening to the No Agenda podcast, which is Adam Curry's podcast, and that Adam Curry said on there that he was going to go on Joe Rogan again to do a repeat because Joe Rogan felt like the problem with the show was that they weren't wearing headphones.
Okay, so let's just to be super accurate.
Okay.
He said that Joe Rogan called him and asked to do a do-over because he felt like he wasn't himself in that interview, and that was because of the headphones. To which Adam Curry said, that makes total sense.
All right. Now, that to me, because Adam Curry is so wackadoodle about sound, he always has been, like when I first started listening to him back 10 years ago, he was always like, if the sound wasn't perfect, he didn't want to start the show. Like, and he'd ask John C. Dvorak many times and say, he's obsessed with sound. He also has a hearing issue that he has some very high-tech hearing aid that makes his sound even better, than his hearing more precise than most people. So he's, for whatever reasons, I'm not also there's lots of other stuff going on, but he is particularly concerned about sound. So that would sound reasonable to someone like him, for someone to say something like that. Let's just pull out any like Tom.
Wait a minute, but wait, hold up. How does that sound reasonable? There were no sound quality issues on the show. Joe wasn't referencing. Joe was saying that was why he dropped the ball and act like a drunk monkey moron.
Right, because I will say this, just partly from knowing like so many DJs from being in the dance music scene. If they're used to a certain set of headphones, say, and then they forget theirs at home, or something goes wrong with one of theirs, and they have to wear someone else's, or like if they are somewhere just playing for fun, like at a friend's after hours, and they don't have their headphones, they're playing without it, like they feel like they do not have like the level of perception that they normally have. Now,
Okay, that makes sense for a DJ because a DJ isn't using intellectual brain capacity to form sentences and analyze. It's not an exchange. All they're doing is
right,
hearing sound and delivering sound.
but let me
It's not a conversation.
finish what I'm saying. So Joe is used to wearing them, right? Like I don't. So Laura always like wants to know why I insist on wearing my hair back all the time, and it's because I can't concentrate if my hair is not back. I'm not used to the feeling of having
It
hair back.
bugs you. You like do this.
So Joe he's been wearing headphones for years, and that's how he is used to feeling when he is I'm first presenting the part of this that is logical, and then we'll get to the illogical parts because that far outweighs the logical part. But Joe is used to having that on, that there, right? And if you notice, like over the years, he's a lot of times told people, pull your microphone closer, readjust this. He also does seem to be a little bit fixated on that kind of stuff, and that could be a personal obsession, or it could be can be something that's like a distraction from a different issue. Like my dad sometimes, like when we're in a deep conversation, he'll like be like, move that glass over there, you're gonna hit it. The glass could be like 5 feet away from where I am, and he thinks that my flailing arms, which are long but not 5 feet long, are somehow going to knock a glass over on a table 5 feet away. And it's a distraction from not being able to either handle the intensity of the conversation, or not wanting to address the thing that I just said or whatever, or wanting to have like a change in the pace or the shift of the conversation. So it is something that I've observed in conversations with people before. So those could be some kind of rational part of it, but the rest is completely irrational, right? But the reason that so those are the parts that are going to speak to like the like weird idiosyncrasies of these two. My thoughts immediately were Joe is used to being cued, right? Or he gets maybe Joe is used to being cued, right? And you know, was Adam wearing headphones during the thing? No, he wasn't either. So maybe they both want. Who the fuck knows, right? But like basically, you know, it was okay, a lot of things. So I think that's weird. I think maybe Joe is more wired up than we think he is in terms of like, you know, being fed ideas or lines or things to talk about. Stop, don't go any farther, distract. You know, I don't think that they're providing content for him, right? But
I think that's the piece. I'm sorry to interrupt, but just before you move away from it, that does make sense as far as Joe is used to taking cues from his handlers through his ears. And maybe because he didn't have that, he was too heavy-handed and too obvious in how he was doing it on his own with Adam.
Yeah, and also he was drinking, and so people, you know what I mean, things get messy and whatnot. As far as this COVID thing, like one of the things he did say is like maybe we'll get back to doing video interviews, or maybe we'll have some in studio with a different producer for a little bit, right?
Which he really didn't want to do, which was sweet. His loyalty to the fake COVID Jamie story was cute.
But then those in-person interviews came quicker than the 10 days, 3 extra tests, all that kind of stuff.
No,
Yeah.
Kanye was already on the books before Kanye and Alex Jones were on the books before he announced that they were canceled.
Right, but they hadn't been recorded. At least we believe they hadn't been recorded, right?
Correct.
So it's possible that they had already recorded the Kanye and they didn't say so, right? But in-person interviews started before that supposed 10 days had passed, right? Which tells me, and I didn't watch the shows, so I don't know if there was interaction with Jamie.
No, none.
So there's likely another producer, and maybe this whole point was they wanted a new producer in there, not permanently, because people are used to Jamie and he'd have to concoct a huge story to explain Jamie being gone. Although I think Jamie is also a controller and a handler of sorts, right? Because Jamie is incredibly anti-conspiracy theory, right? And Jamie's had done a strange selection of media appearances himself. Like he's been on the Glenn Beck show, and it's been a weird combination of things, right? So maybe there was a different producer for those spots to sort of implement what the formula is going to be, or sort of like teetered, like they realized things were going in a bad direction and things were becoming Captain Obvious, so they needed something to steady the ship, right?
Mhm.
He then proceeded with huge shows, right? Now, Maynard and Kanye both, not Kanye, Maynard and Matthew McConaughey are both Austin locals. They both live in
Okay.
Kanye obviously does not. There was an African-American gentleman and another gentleman who I'm not familiar with, who I don't know necessarily where they're from, but so he did several shows. Maybe some of those had been in the can before, maybe not. And maybe there was a different producer in there to sort of like just balance the ship, because things had been a little off steady, right? And things seems to have balanced a little, but of course, the show that we didn't get was Alex Jones, right? And so that's interesting. And it could be that they like this controversy also about the not Alex Jones, or it could be that they wanted to avoid Alex Jones. Both would be intelligence, like purposes and whatnot. So I think there's a lot of stuff going on there. I've only watched clips since that happened. I haven't watched any whole shows. I've seen some stuff and I'm like, yeah, that's reasonable, and some stuff that I'm like, yeah, that's nonsense. So it's hard to say, but I'll say this, right? Like what I see as the overall thing happening is that there is a battle, probably multiple battles, for like the controlling, what do they call it, when controlling share in the direction that Joe Rogan is going. So he had like a certain group of handlers for quite a while in Los Angeles, right? And he relocated, and there's probably now like new groups or like sort of vying for like being the controlling aspect of where this goes, but they don't have it completely. And so I think there's a faction here that involves like the Adam Curry kind of thing. And I think that could be like a commingled, like I think that this weird thing we were watching of like who was kind of controlling who is part of the sort of like illusion of some of it, right? To a certain extent, or maybe they're both sort of being controlled by a further back entity, but each of them thinks that they're controlled. Like this is how crazy some of this shit gets, right? But that whole thing was very weird. And also, like, obviously, it makes perfect sense that when you relocate to a new city, if there are interesting people in that city, you start with doing a lot of them. That makes sense. But I think they're really having a trial run of who his like regular locals are going to be. Like here in LA, he had Joey Diaz and Brian Cat. All the like he had people who were consistently part of the show that were LA locals, Duncan and whatever, right? So I think they're looking for who that team is going to be there, because whether or not the people who are part of the regulars are controlled on their own or not is not the issue. Like, just like we all do this. We have regulars. I have regulars on my show, and then other people who I just do one-offs with and whatever. They're trying to figure out like what the cast of characters are going to be, so then they can figure out where they're going to insert their things of control, right? Like one of the things that I always had figured out, and this doesn't have so much to do with the locals, but like oftentimes like Joe would have Abby Martin on, which I disagree with her about a lot of stuff, but she was like really the only one who was like questioning of Israel and more pro-Palestine who would ever come on his show, right? And she would say things, very controversial things about people who he liked, right? And then within just usually a few weeks after she had been on, the CIA agent guy would come on and say, and sort of redirect some of that sort of underhandedly, not in an obvious way, it felt like to me. Or right, so or they'd have that kind of thing. Now I'm not saying that like all of that is designed and intentional, but that was a pattern I had started to notice, right? And so like some of that stuff may happen with Adam. Like it may be that like things go a certain way for a bit on the show, and then when they need to be circled back or shaken up or sent in a different direction again, that's like when Adam comes in and does a little of that stuff that looks like he's being a little bit like oppositional, or a little bit or that it's just like a bros hanging and right, but it also like creates a shakeup that then sends it in some other kind of way. So I don't know. I mean, I don't really know. It's harder and harder for me to watch any at length. I pop in on some of the clips. A lot of times I don't finish the clips anymore. I was alarmed at the clip that I saw that included Kanye. I haven't watched the whole show yet, so we'll only talk about the Kanye thing a little bit because you're wanting me to watch the whole thing because you think there's interesting stuff there. But the dramatic and uncomfortable pauses in between his, not only Joe's question and the answer, but like Kanye would say a sentence or half a sentence and then stop for sometimes almost a minute before he finished, like was really odd to me. And then also Jeff pointed it out to me, and I had noticed it, but I was so taken aback by the pauses that I didn't focus on this. The looking down, almost as if there was like a teleprompter screen on the floor of the little red communist capsule or something like that. Like now, I guess that could be a form of concentration or trying to put together your thoughts, but it was odd. It was odd, and I was so alarmed by it that like I didn't even watch any more clips. I'm like, this is fucking crazy, right? And
okay, so can I speak to that before we get just too far away from all the things that you've mentioned? Because you sent me I don't watch Joe anymore. It's hard for me to stomach the programming that comes through. So generally, as soon as I hear him, you know, with one of his like pro pharma things or anti-conspiracy things or whatever, like I turn him off. So you sent me that clip, and I mean, PS, he's doing it in person. So he clearly hasn't gotten 3 clean COVID tests. Right. We just need to acknowledge that. It's been less than a week since he made the announcement, and Kanye was in the studio, clearly flew in. I don't know, maybe he ran there, maybe he drove there, whatever, but like they were in person. So I saw the clip you sent me and I completely agreed. And we talked about, okay, this is why he's back on the headphones, because Kanye's clearly being fed the information. And then I got frustrated with myself after I watched the whole thing and just seeing how every single, I mean, the media, I don't want to just hone in on Trump, but like any sort of clip taken out of context can make anyone look any way the media wants to make them look. And that clip was completely not indicative of the whole 3-hour conversation. And I can see why you and Jeff would draw those conclusions. It made perfect sense having only seen that clip.
Yeah.
But in the context of the whole interview, I got a completely different impression. So because I saw that clip, I was watching the interview through a certain lens of like, okay, Kanye's controlled, like where can I find these catches? And so that's how I was watching it, because he's a wild man, you know, he's just going on these very long tangents that he calls symphonies, and Joe is just kind of letting him run. I mean, I actually think Joe did a really good job of it, but he speaks he's going from like topic to topic to tendril off to this offshoot and here and there. And then Joe's basically for the first 2 hours, Joe was just kind of like trying to make him feel safe and let him know, like, I know everyone else thinks you're crazy, but I don't. I just think you're smart, like kind of a kiss-assy thing. But so the pieces that I caught were, one, he said that he thinks Twitter is the least censored social media platform. Mm-hmm. And this interview was done in the past couple of days. So I'm like, okay, controlled, right? Because that was the lens through which I was watching it. And then he had 2 mentions of Kodak. And I had noticed some other videos that I saw last week. I'm noticing how Kodak is slipping in and that we need to be excited about Kodak. And I had sent you the tour says, where she did a whole show about Kodak and how Kodak, which is known for printing, but now they're in the pharmaceutical business and they've been given, oh yeah. So that was part of, so this is something that I'm encouraging us to get deeper into as we go down the rabbit hole. So Kodak got all this money from the government to start making our pharmaceuticals as part of the Trump administration's let's bring manufacturing back to the States. Mm-hmm. So it kind of seems like a good thing, except they're a printing company. They're not a pharmaceutical company.
Oh, that makes sense to me. I'll tell you why that makes it. That doesn't make sense in a way that we would like, but it makes sense logically based on what I know. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So super kindergarten overview is that they're really good at 3D printing. So if there's 3D printing organs or 3D printing things, and how a big part of this fake pandemic and pushing everyone to be tested is to collect their DNA. So they're creating this huge DNA database that Kodak has access to. So, oh, lo and behold, George Soros needs a new kidney, and wow, someone in the database is a perfect match, and they're driving a Tesla, and oh, they just got into a car accident and died, and now their kidney is available. Like, just kind of tying into that whole thing.
Okay.
So
Okay.
No, go ahead.
Okay, so if I'm gonna have to find some information that is separate from Tor before I'm willing to consider this in any other way than I normally like just play with information in my head, right? But so you listen like long back into like Sophia Smallstorm's like stuff. She's constantly talked about how the plan was to use our bodies as 3D printers, right? And so that would make sense to me on that account, that the idea is really like not totally what you're saying is possible, but like I think the greater thing is that they want to like even if you're 3D printing an organ, it's actually better to do it inside a human body, just like they try and regrow human organs inside of pigs and things like that. So you have that sort of environment of like the inside of the body kind of stuff like that, right? And so like, but I like if you can actually generate it from inside a body as opposed to generating it outside and then putting it in the body to sort of grow or to heart, whatever, right? So Sophia used to talk about a lot about things like little bits of technology that's organized themselves and sort of come together inside the body. But she's also talked about putting together machines that will then 3D print stuff. And this was really in relation to a lot of odd things related to Morgellons, when people were producing like weird like bugs and feathers and shit like that out of their body. Like, where are these coming from? People aren't swallowing feathers, like, you know, kind of thing. And even, that isn't how it works. If you swallow a feather, it doesn't come out of your skin, right? So like these seem to be, and some of these had almost like, when you look at, just like when you look at some of these modern day quote unquote mosquitoes and shit, they look like little drones or little technologies. That's what some of these things that people were finding inside their bodies looked like. And so she was, you know, making the leap based on evidence, right? So that makes sense to me because they're in printing. But the other thing is, remember years ago, they would talk about swallowing capsules that had a little camera in them that would go through and look at the inside of your organs when they were trying to decide if you were a candidate for certain therapies or whatnot. So I think that is a large part of it as well. So I've talked to people both from that, like worried about surveillance from a health perspective, but even back like when I was hanging around lots of people that did drugs, like I have literally heard from people like and what was always crazy to me is how is the crazy shit that I heard from people who are on drugs also the things that I hear from some of these most brilliant people who analyze surveillance, and also people who are like think that they're target individuals but have never done drugs, right? The connecting thing might be that like, smart dust is available everywhere, and they experimented first on drug communities and then they moved out into other groups, right? But people would say stuff like, I was looking at myself in the mirror and I saw a camera flash from inside of my body, my skin or my eyes or something like that, right? So if they're able to have really, really tiny cameras, really, really tiny like printing units and things like that, I mean, this sounds insane, but this is where we're at, right? That where, you know, everything has been reduced down to really tiny size, and things that we would only have ever thought of as technologies and processes that existed outside the body are now swimming around inside of us, you know, outside of our, you know, awareness or consent. So that makes sense to me about Kodak on a certain level. But even like, I'd have to go and do like some deep research on Kodak, but a lot of these like camera, video kind of companies, they have a lot of patents on prismatic technologies with light spectrum things and stuff like that. So I think we could be getting into even weirder territory than our normal brain allows us to immediately think of when we think of Kodak. When you look at some of the symbols of some of these companies, like Polaroid has like the color spectrum, right? And Polaroid has been an interesting thing over time, right? Because that was a unique style of picture taking, you know, kind of thing. So when you look at some of the symbology and some of the patents of these companies, there's a much more ancient, much more metaphysical thing going on with some of them. So I think that the sky's the limit on the possibilities as to why Kodak could be having a new level of importance in a variety of ways.
Right. And I think I mean, I still encourage you to get over the Tor thing, and I also respect where you're at. So do whatever research is necessary. In this video, which I posted in my Telegram group, if anyone wants to see it, she talks about how some of the technology is non-local. It talks about teleportation. So like if Kodak is printing your medicine, and they have and they have your DNA on file, and they track, oh, well, they have the dormant genetics for XYZ, that Kodak has the technology to turn on something in the pharmaceuticals it's printing for you to bring on a heart attack, to bring on an embolism, to bring on an aneurysm, to make you sick.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. And just by the way, just because I have an sort of intuitive disdain for her doesn't mean that she isn't right about many or even most of the things she says, right? Like if she's a disinformation person, the disinformation occurs in just a small percentage of the material. So I'm working really hard at separating content from character in a lot of ways. So I listen to it, but for me to go and like make a theory based on it, I would just have to also find it somewhere else besides just her.
Totally. And the reason it came up, which you and I were talking about before we hopped on, was that I keep, whatever media I was listening to last week, I just kept hearing people talking about Kodak, Kodak, Kodak. And then when I heard Kanye say it, I'm like, and I went back and found the Torres video. So getting back to Kanye, on this end of having watched all 3 hours, I actually don't think he's controlled, and I actually don't think he's controllable. I think there's some areas where, because he's super famous, where he might be sheltered and just not know what he's talking about. Unless part of the deal of getting him on was to get him to say that about Twitter and to get him to say a couple other things. But what I thought was really interesting, and he really won me over by the end, but that Joe let him speak in these long 25-minute rants, and Joe would just sit there quietly. And then when he was talking about, Joe started to press him because he's pushing to be president right now, not 2024, but he's pushing for people to write him in right now.
Well, because we have an emergency coming, so.
I mean, or everything's a fucking emergency. Just the fact that people would even consider voting for Biden is an emergency. But so Joe pushed him on healthcare, and Joe was trying not to sound like a socialist. Like, I'll give him props. He put some effort into trying not to sound like a socialist. But Kanye, who actually, when he was talking about stuff, sounded really freaking intelligent and really attuned to a higher vibration. But he said, the aim of capitalist medicine is to keep us. And Joe fucking interrupted him and said, "You mean to treat us?" And so right then and there, I just saw, it was like, you know how you have those moments where you see your whole life flash before you? So I saw, okay, Joe is working for the pharmaceutical cabal because he interrupted his flow to change that one word. And Kanye said, yeah, to treat us, to keep us in slavery. And then and also to see how controllable Kanye is. And Kanye took it for a second, but then didn't, so he's not controllable. And then I saw everything that happened in the Adam Curry, where Joe was testing Adam to see how controllable he was, and Adam kept taking the bait and saying, yes, I'm controllable, yes, I'm controllable. And I just saw, all this is happening in the public sphere. Like, Kanye just failed in that moment, and he let them know, no, you can't control me. But it was so clear, like, what in Joe, where he would allow Kanye to go off on these long tangents for as long as he did, but he felt the need to interrupt, to correct, to defend the pharmaceutical cabal.
Okay, so a lot of stuff was just said there. As to like this thing going on publicly, like with the Adam and Joe thing, right? Like, I think both things, I think Adam, that what you're saying where he's showing how he can be controlled, I think some of that is him putting it on. Right? Like, I think it's part of a dance that's happening here.
But why? Is he putting it on because he misses being famous, or does he have an end game that's for the good?
Or is he just trying to be not so obvious about the fact that he's there to attempt to, he may be just there to control one thing, right? So disarm the people from thinking about that, try and disarm you and I from thinking that, right? Like, all this other stuff, he's not there to control all those other things, so he'll concede all that other stuff. If he gets, and this might be a long-term dance, right? This might not be like a like one and done kind of thing, right? So as for the Kanye thing that you're saying,
well, hold up, because I want to stay with Adam for a little bit, and since it seems like he's not coming on our show, like, we can talk about it. I feel like there are a few things at play, and I saw it in the Kanye show as well, as far as like our collective obsession with fame
Mhm.
is a pathology that has us in this position, because all the famous movie stars are telling us what to think about politics, and we've gotten to that crazy level. And so I'm curious about Adam. I'm like, okay, is he playing the long game? And is he playing along to get in with Joe and to ultimately get some truths in to the collective conscious for the greater good? Or is there a part of him that misses his fame from back in the MTV days and sees this as a way to get back on top? I don't know, but
So both, and also he, like in the 80s, right? Essentially, what he was largely doing was handling celebrities, right? He's brought into MTV. He's been around the biggest celebrities in the world, right? And we think of it as like, oh, he's there and he's lucky he gets to interview them, right? But like a lot of times, if you're familiar with the way some of this stuff works, like they're there to monitor or to control or whatnot, right? And in this day and age, those super, like, it's becoming less and less the music stars that are the big celebrities, and Joe Rogan is now the biggest, a big celebrity. He's as famous.
Keep in mind, Joe's been famous and working to maintain his fame since what, 2000s, late 90s?
Right.
And I think there's some sort of addiction to fame and that level of attention that we have to acknowledge as far as the people who are driving culture.
Absolutely, right, absolutely. But Adam Curry is used to being there and talking to people when they're in the height of their fame.
Mm-hmm.
That's his role, right? And lots of times your news anchors, your newsmen, things like that, they were working for intelligence agencies and they were handling things or transporting information. That's the other thing. It could be about an information transfer of sorts, right? Kind of, there's a million things that can be going on, right? Like, you're right. And all those things could be mushed together, and some of it can be genuine and some of it can be a put on and some of it can be because they're doing what they're paid to be there to do. Like, this is like, you know, we're living in this like really weird time where the amount of information of varying types and with various intents is flying through the air like at a faster ability than anybody's able to sort of like reasonably comprehend it or digest it or anything like that. So, and that's part of what is making this, like all of this crap that's going on possible, because nobody has the time to parse it all out and to really figure it out. It's coming much faster. It's like having 10 baseballs pitched at you at once and trying to hit one of them for a home run. It makes it hard, even though you think, well, you have a 1 out of 10 chance, that's easier than a 1 out of 1 chance. But no, when there's that much chaos coming, you can't even sort it out, right?
Totally.
So I think that, and then you know, but yes, like Adam has always been at a certain proximity to very famous people and conducted whatever work he's doing, whether we are totally wrong and it's just only ever been what it outwardly appeared to be, or whether there's something else going on. His work exists at a certain proximity to incredibly famous, incredibly powerful people. Whether they deserve that level of power based on their fame is another entire. And as a society, we have got to reckon with our collective obsession with celebrity and power, because that's totally how we've ended up in this controlled space. As for Kanye, so he's both incredibly controllable and also like probably very, very resistant to control. Now,
I'm pretty sure he's a project kid watching
100%, because I was just about to say, whenever he goes off the reservation, he ends up at Cedars-Sinai, right? And so we all know about that kind of stuff, right? And so there's that. But as far as what you said about Joe letting, so my guess would be that maybe part of the agreement to go on the show with Joe was that he be allowed to speak freely for a period of time. And then at a period of time, he's open to being grilled a little bit or pressed a little bit. That would be.
Yeah. I feel like there were a couple things like on the checklist that he had to agree to. I agree with that. And I think one was the Twitter thing. I think two, there was a moment where they both agreed that it was impossible to control Bernie. They both said that really straight out. And he didn't mention Trump. So I feel like those were parameters that were agreed upon beforehand.
That's certainly possible. Like, so they're ridiculous, honestly, right? But that's certainly possible. But I think most of it was like that there'd be 2 hours where like there'd be a question answered or something, and you let him do his full thing, and then there can be more like a style of interview agreed on. And again, I may have a completely different assessment of this after I watch it. but it's so hard for me to get things watched these days that I'm offering this intuitive
This
assessment.
one's worth it because it wasn't what I thought it was gonna be. Like I would fucking vote for Kanye at this moment.
So I want to go on a couple of other things though. His comment about Twitter, like that may be his experience. Maybe he has the least amount of his stuff censored there.
Totally.
Or maybe that's the truth. Maybe we don't realize how censorious some of these, now he probably doesn't know about like the little more, less popular ones or the more sort of anarchist or libertarian social media platforms. He may just know the ones that are as famous as he is. So maybe Facebook and a few of these other things, Instagram, like are really censorious, just in a different way and as to his experience.
Right. Well, when I first heard it, it sounded absurd given what just happened a week ago with the New York Post and Biden laptop. But by the end of the interview, I thought, I don't think he knows about that. So it felt innocent by the end.
They may not know about it, or this interview could have been recorded earlier than we thought. So it could have happened before that on a certain level, right? It could have been pre-recorded, which is what we don't know. We don't know, right? So, and then the other thing is like imagine how terrifying that is if Twitter is the least censorious platform, right? So that actually could be quite terrifying. Like it's possible he didn't say it, like maybe they're right, like who knows, right? But like if somebody if that, let's just say that's the truth, and that all these platforms that are even more censorious than we think they are, right? Because we haven't had that direct experience, or our favorite content creators haven't been booted off of them. So that's kind of terrifying. Then as to your thing about the pharmaceutical industry, like why would Joe be like, we're trying to think of deep reasons aside from just that he's like a shill for like mainstream accepted reality. He has a nootropics company that he doesn't promote on his show anymore. So he's obviously trying to not have everybody constantly know that he's involved in ONNIT as he was back in the beginning. Mm-hmm. As people begin to reject like the regular pharmaceutical industry, right? Those same.
Oh, he's gonna put out his own vaccine.
The same pharmaceutical companies are going to start moving into the realm of nootropics because those are more widely accepted and probably can be manipulated to do a lot of the same stuff that the chemicals can be, right? Like by combining them with certain things, right? Like who the fuck knows? Like making a synthetic version, who the fuck knows, right? But no matter, like at a certain point, the pharmaceutical industry sees the direction that things are going and that people are becoming more aware again of natural medicine. So they're going to want to capture that market too, right? So his was one of the first very well.
Not natural.
I know that, but it's a very well-known nootropics company. That's very well known, and the people who are the big boys at ONNIT, Joe and Aubrey Marcus, have dubious connections, obviously, with other things. And Aubrey Marcus and his father are dubious right? So all I'm saying is, and this is one of the things that people have often talked about when they're worried about like Codex Alimentarius and they're being like, are they going to outlaw natural supplements? No, these big cabal pharmaceutical industries will just try and move in and capture that too. They want both markets. They want the, right? And so this could be some of that, like, because to my awareness, and this doesn't mean that it's not true. He's not sponsored by any pharmaceutical companies.
Obviously not on the books, but you look at this guy who's devoted, he's an athlete, he's devoted, he has this paleo lifestyle, and the way he's been shilling for pharmaceuticals and for vaccines for the past few years is very obvious, is very egregious and very short-sighted, and doesn't line up with how he lives his life or how much he knows. So there's a giant disconnect there.
Yeah, totally.
And his total stance on the fake pandemic. So for me, I felt like, and I'm not discounting, it doesn't ring true for me what you're saying, but I'm not saying, what the fuck do I know? But the fact that when you watch the interview and you see how he lets Kanye run and sprint and dance and do cartwheels and doesn't say shit, but that was where he felt the need to interrupt his guests and correct him. Mm-hmm. That is pure pharmaceutical shilling. I don't see any other logic for that moment. Yeah. And just so our audience knows, I just want to be clear. I stopped the video. That was at 2 hours, 32 minutes, 28 seconds. And I went to get the transcript to copy it, which is how I normally get it because I wanted to get all the words. And YouTube has no transcript option available for the Joe Rogan Kanye, which they've never done, as far as I'm concerned, on any, as far as I know, on any other video.
Yeah, that is weird. My point is, like, not saying that he's not shilling for the pharmaceutical industry, but a deep reason that he may have or he may use to make sense of it is that nootropic, is it right that there may be an in with his nootropic company? Like, that's all I'm saying is that he.
But then why would he need to change the narrative from the pharmaceutical cabal is trying to keep you in their system to the pharmaceutical cabal is trying to treat you? If that were his motivation, why would he need to micromanage Kanye's languaging to that extent?
Nootropics and natural medicines may become pharmaceutical. Like, they may be, right? Like, it may be that these things continue to be available, but only as prescription, or only from, right? Or like that they become much more patentable and all that various kind of stuff, right? And so then those are the new pharmaceutical industry. See, the pharmaceutical industry is kind and wonderful and friendly. They give you natural stuff, but right, but now you have to get permission, just like the other stuff, and it's there to treat you, not keep you, right? And anything you have to ask permission for is keep. And so that would be why he needs to, we're going really far sort of out on this here, but all I'm saying is that it's not like he doesn't have some sort of like personal interest financially, even if he's not behind the scenes manipulated by pharmaceuticals, at this idea of medicines are good for you, right?
I don't buy it, but I really like you and I respect you.
But go do some research on like the like Codex Alimentarius.
I mean, I dove deep into that on Plandemic. I know all about that, and I'm not of the same perspective as you. I do think they're going to outlaw all of that. I don't think they're going to try to just co-opt it and make it their own. Look what happened when Bayer, aka Monsanto, decided to get into the CBD business. Every one of my friends in the CBD business had their Twitter accounts taken down, their PayPal. Bayer attacked anyone who was doing anything CBD that wasn't them. That's
exactly my point.
So they're going to do the same with, I mean, I hear what you're saying, and maybe they'll be doing that, but it still does not, I don't buy that that's why Joe clamped down on Kanye's languaging because of some like long-term ONNIT vaccine schedule. I think he's being 1,000% controlled by Big Pharma.
So I'm not saying that he's not being 1,000% controlled by Big Pharma, but I'm saying part of like really effective controlling of a person is letting them believe that they have some sincere interest in what they're saying beyond just the paycheck. That's how like it's able to have some, like there's lots of people out there that just bought that line and sinker without questioning it like you did, or like I might when I hear it, right? Okay, and so there has to be some degree of like a natural heartfelt thing in what a person is saying. This mind control goes deep, and also it's entirely possible that I'm crazy and I'm reading way too much into it just based on too many hours looking at too many disparate things and whatnot. But I don't think that natural medicine will ever be outlawed. I think it will be captured, right? It will be captured. So just completely separate from whether Joe's doing that or why he's doing it. Like, I think that like at a certain, like imagine the power in like outlawing it, right? But then later, a year or two after, people are complaining about they can't get their natural medicines. Oh, well, you can get them now, but you're going to get them through Bayer or blah, 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 or blah, blah, blah. And people will accept, oh, well, at least I get my natural, or people who don't know any better or whatever, right? Like whenever there's something to sell, the people are going to want to sell it. They're not going to want to do away with something that they can make money off of. They just want to prevent other people from having control over their own health and from being able to make, you know, little amounts when they can patent something and make a bigger amount, right? So I think that's like the possibility of nature being captured as a replacement for people who are no longer buying the synthetic medicine thing is something we have to be concerned about as well, you know? So I didn't mean to take us way off there with that, but that was kind of, that was what was sort of informing my thoughts about that, you know?
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Company. Yeah.
No, I think it's relevant, and I think you took us to a good place. And I hadn't noticed that he had stopped mentioning ONNIT, but that is I wonder if that had something to do with Spotify, because I guess he stopped mentioning well, I don't know. I'm not listening to him on the podcast anymore. I'm just listening on YouTube.
He used to always talk about the Fleshlight and ONNIT and all of these other things.
Or Sigmatic.
I've never heard him talk. That must have been during a period when I wasn't listening. But at a certain point, I stopped hearing any of that stuff. But again, watching on YouTube, you may not. Although why? Why wouldn't you also promote it on YouTube? Who the fuck knows, right? Like, it's hard to say with all this kind of stuff. But the thing with Kanye also, like, is, you know, he lives in one of the most mind-controlled and mind-controlling families, right? In all of nonsense. He lives with Kardashians, right? Like, they're under mind control, and they're like acting to control the minds of a lot of people, right? Bruce Jenner's part of that family, Kim Kardashian, Robert Kardashian, all the little Jenners running around, including Brody, and right, they're out. There's a lot of mind control being perpetrated from one cluster there on the hill in Calabasas, right? I mean, literally the amount of people that's mind or controlled just by Kim Kardashian's ass alone defies logic to me, right? But this is the stupid world we live in, right?
Yeah, this is a stupid world we live in. And what we had touched in on a little bit was the first 2 hours was me trying not to choke on my own vomit of hearing him brag about how famous he is and how he made Gap's stock market skyrocket and Adidas, and he did this and he did that. And then I understood by the time he got to his presidential platform, it wasn't so much a platform, where I understood, oh, he understands that we're a fame obsessed culture. And there's an angle at which I could look at this and see, oh, he gets, like, perhaps it's going to take that level of fame to snap us into an evolved culture, an evolved species. And a lot of his ideas were brilliant and beautiful. But it kind of switched it for me, because I was so disgusted by the fame thing and the celebrity thing, and I kept jotting down notes. And then I got, oh, this might be what it takes to get the sheep on board.
I'm gonna have a hard time making it through if there's all that bragging about fame and celebrity.
But what it did, because I was so disgusted, was when he finally got to talking about his presidency, I got, oh, he is very effective. I got, like, the proof of concept in, because I don't know, I don't listen to him, you know, like, I'm not tracking his career. I didn't realize.
I couldn't tell you one Kanye song. Could you tell me one Kanye song?
Hell no. Yeah. I don't know anything about him. But what I got was, it was all proof of concept, and it made me understand this is a very successful person who's incredibly successful in a lot of different realms. And I'm turned off by that kind of bragging, and I'm not really into fame. But I understood, because when he was talking about how he would be effective as a president, I could get on board, because I understood, you know, all that he'd done, whereas before I didn't. I
will try to make myself watch, and I'll report back to you on what I think of all of this. The only thing I really know about Kanye, other than that he's famous and that he's married to the biggest mind control family that there is, and whatnot, is that his, like, mom died in some weird plastic surgery event.
Yeah, he mentioned it, and what really struck me is what a genuine, sensitive, empathic human he clearly is. And the real thing, and I feel like this is really the leg up that he has, is that he's an incredibly spiritual person. And he's, you know, when he was talking about his mom and that pain, that was very humanizing. But it's his spiritual connection to, like, a higher truth and a higher good that really sets him apart, and I think is important to pay attention to.
All right, well, I will pay attention. I do remember at the time that thing happened with his mom, like, that he was devastated, and that there was a lot of reporting on how big of a deal she was in his life and whatnot, and how this really, like, he may never be the same after her being gone and all that kind of stuff. That's really the only thing I know about Kanye, other than that Sally really likes him.
Yeah, I know even less. I know nothing.
All right, so you sent me a little note. I'm sorry, I'm not good at tracking the messages well.
You're doing great.
I haven't had a chance to explore your side of the Ice Cube issue, so I'm not in a space to be able to talk about that right now. my own little thing, and this is just that I have actually watched almost no Unity 2020 or Bret whatever kind of stuff, just because I've been busy, and then some of the things people he's been talking to don't resonate for me. I usually try and watch when there's someone on who I have some like or interest in, so there's that. But I did pop in for somewhere between 7 seconds and 3 minutes, I can't remember, of a Unity campfire thing, or live stream he was doing with Jo Jorgenson, who is the libertarian candidate for president, who obviously doesn't understand certain social issues right now, or doesn't really understand libertarianism, because she says it's important that we be anti-racist, so we must be anti-racist. So she either doesn't understand that anti-racism is really racism, she doesn't understand that libertarians aren't supposed to tell you you must do anything, right? So I don't know what that is, but she obviously is well enough versed in something that she caught the blip I went in on. Bret was trying to Delphi technique her, right? He was trying to say, so we agree that this and this and that, right? And she's like, no, I don't. And she was mad. She's like, no, stop. I don't agree, right?
Yes.
I don't even know if I have the context for what was being talked about, but so far, the only two people that I've seen protest against his attempts to just either roll over a disagreement and pretend it's a disagreement, or like disguise the fact that he's very dismayed that they have an opposing idea to his, and so just ramble on about something that whatever.
Is that what they call gaslighting? I'm not sure.
Gaslighting is a little bit different. Gaslighting is like, I mean, there's definitely crossover, right? But the Delphi technique is about gaining consensus and getting the person who to not recognize that they actually disagree with you, and to it's about gaining consensus. Whereas gaslighting is just about really like making a person go crazy because you're, like doing things that are intended to stoke them, but not leave them out to prove that you've kind of stoked them, kind of thing, right? Like, yeah. There's various techniques of gaslighting. It's a little different, but there is crossover, and both techniques are used by people who are trying to mind control people, right? But this was like a violent protest. No, I don't agree with you. What
was he trying to strong arm her into?
I didn't get the I stumbled onto her. No, wait a second, right? So I only saw the other side of it. I couldn't even really understand it, but he had tried to roll her into agreement, which is what Delphi technique and consensus is about. And she was very clear. No, I don't agree. And stop. She was mad. It wasn't like, oh, you misunderstand. He was like, stop that. I'm catching you, right? The only people I've really seen do that kind of thing is Justin Amash and Jo Jorgenson, who are both libertarians, right? Or libertarian leaning. I don't know that I would count either of them as pure libertarians in any way. So at least as far as like the people who he's trying to gain consensus of publicly to mind control the public into consent, it seems that he's having better luck on the quasi-progressive side than on the quasi-libertarian side, which is kind of
interesting. And when we say quasi-progressive, do we mean leftists?
I haven't seen any people on there that I consider to be like heartfelt, genuine progressives, right? Because there is such a thing. I know people who are that.
Who would be a heartfelt, genuine progressive, just so we can have a baseline?
Like I'm trying to, it's hard for me to think of one that would be someone that people actually know. Like I know people personally in my own life, but like trying to think of someone who, like I'm not going to say that she isn't controlled on any certain level, right? But when like somebody like Jill Stein, right? Like there is a very consistent, if you track her from the beginning of when she became publicly known till her last run for president, there is a consistency to the things that she says are important that aren't in discrepancy with something else that she has said that is right. She's not taking issues that are not Green Party in nature and trying to say they are so that people will like vote for her. I didn't see her doing a lot of that. Like it's pretty consistent. My belief is that she genuinely believes the things that she says, right? And that she has been consistent over time, and that, right? So I'm not saying that there was no tomfoolery or tomfuckery or performative shit or any kind of that stuff like that with her. but she's not this person who's like, keeps saying things. Like, I see this a lot. Like you'll see someone like Bill Maher who says things that are obviously non-libertarian and then claims to be a libertarian. Mm-hmm. Right? I don't see that conflict with her. A lot of the people that like are presented as from like the more left-leaning common sense group of people that he has on there, like they just like I haven't heard a lot of the protests of no, I don't agree with you. I have heard that Jesse Ventura disagreed with him a lot too, but I didn't see that one. So that's just, but I have no love for Jo Jorgensen. I have no love for the Libertarian Party at this point. It's been a huge disappointment, but I did really enjoy that moment of, hold it right there. So I don't know if she's aware of the Delphi technique, but what you just felt trying to be worked on, you, Joe, was the Delphi technique. And there is something in you that is still in touch with like some version of reality that is wholesome and good and and whatnot. And you with the protest. So
also interesting to note that Bret got deplatformed from Facebook, which gives him so much street cred for his uber edgy Unity 2020 instead of 4 years of Republican Democrat theater bullshit. Let's sign on for 8 years of it.
Right. So Bret Weinstein supposedly got deplatformed from Facebook. And I think all this stuff is done to like give him that edge of like, this is really dangerous stuff, just like this faux Spotify controversy with the employees wanting to censor. Not that I don't believe that there aren't crazy enough people to do it, but the fact that it's being paid the amount of attention it is to try and frame the public, give the public the idea that Joe Rogan is very edgy. Like if you like Joe Rogan, you are off the plantation. So anything further than that is just outer space insane, right? So they're trying to make like what Bret is proposing seem very controversial, which it's not. It's just like, it's synthesis. It's actually something the system would love largely. It also like distracts from the larger, censorious actions. Like Facebook is censoring people that truly are pushing envelopes, right? But they may not be as famous as Bret Weinstein. So he gets some little blurbs about it in the news and gets to whine about it and gets other people saying, did you see that Bret Weinstein was like, even I was disappointed. Karlin Borisenko made a video about it, right? Now, I don't think anyone should be censored ever, including Bret Weinstein, right? And so I was glad that she was standing up for that, but you don't see her standing up for like some really controversial people that are being purged off of these social media sites. She stood up she made a video about Bret Weinstein.
Right. Well, keep in mind, she's still kind of a Dem leftist. Like, I think
I don't think this makes her controlled or bought or in on it. It just, it's working to fool some people, right?
A lot of it is not like it's not all everyone's controlled. It's just like we talk about who we happen to be interested in. Yeah. Just because we don't talk about some people, it's just.
But the other thing, tell them what happened though. After you tell them about your little interaction with Bret.
It was so little.
It's interaction, but it's hilarious.
It was just so little. So he posted about it on Twitter that he was deplatformed, and I said, but it does lend. I said exactly what I just said here. I said it does lend a certain street cred to your uber edgy, and I think I put that in quotes, Unity 2020 ticket. Fancy that. And he liked it. And I was like, oh, I guess the sarcasm wasn't thick enough.
Yeah, right. You were making fun of him. But like, that's how, like, it was hilarious. I don't ever get any response, any interaction. You always get at least one sort of response or interaction or whatever. So I love that sort of continued in this sort of little thing. So is there anything else? I'm trying to think if there was anything else.
There were two other things, but I also just want to acknowledge the time. There was my self-defense course.
Oh, let's take that to Afterwords. Let's do that.
Okay, so we'll do that for Afterwards. And there was also the octopus documentary that everyone's talking about on Netflix.
Okay, so let's go to Afterwords with those two things. So thank you everybody for tuning into Words and number 35 and Afterwords number. There aren't 35 Afterwards, but just for the sake of me being able to file things together, it's Afterwards number 35. We're going to talk about Dani's self-defense course and the Octopi documentary. And you can find that at Dani's Patreon, which is just Dani Katz. Mm-hmm. Okay, or my Patreon, patreon.com/offplanetmedia for the bonus segment. We will see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.